right. Well, so I would love to introduce Amy Ort, Senior Instructional Designer from the University of Nebraska Lincoln. She is not a first timer. She has presented with the Peralta Online Equity Conference before, and we're so happy that she's back. Today, she's going to tell us a little bit about and engage us in conversation about how do you prepare a university or community college, we'll put in parentheses, to meet Title II digital accessibility requirements. Amy, take it away.
Thank you for that introduction. I'm going to go ahead and drop a link to the slides in the chat for anyone that wants to follow along as we are going through today. So as Kevin said, I am an instructional designer. I work in our Teaching and Learning Center at the University of Nebraska Lincoln. And my team has been spending rather a lot of time over the last, we'll say, year or so, really thinking carefully about these impending changes to the Title II, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and what those changes are going to mean for our university. Anytime that I'm talking to folks at teaching and learning centers at other universities or colleges, it seems like we're all kind of in the same boat of knowing there's a lot of work to be done, that it's a challenging road ahead, but running into a lot of challenges along the way. And so I thought today it may be useful for us to have a little bit of a conversation around what are we all doing? What are the roadblocks we're running into? And are there some ways that we can maybe combine forces or, use one another's resources and things like that to maybe make this road a little bit easier. So as I'm going through, absolutely feel free to drop any questions or comments you have in the chat. I'd like to keep this a lively, interactive session. So today I am going to briefly start by talking a little bit about the updated Title II requirements, and what the main challenges that we're running into for public colleges and universities, just in case there are some folks in here that are maybe less familiar, particularly if you're coming from a private institution where this is maybe not as front and center for you. And then I'll talk a little bit about our approach at the University of Nebraska Lincoln, and then save most of our time for conversation about what are we all doing, and can we maybe join forces to make this work a little bit easier. So to start off with, if you all wouldn't mind just kind of posting in the chat a feel for where you're personally at. So you can type a 1 if it's I know what's going on, I'm confident, my courses are going to be ready, or I'm working in a center that really feels like it has a handle on this and we're going to be okay. 2 is I'm somewhat knowledgeable, but know that I need some more help, some more training. And then 3 is I came here because I'm very new to this and don't quite know what's going on. So what are these updates that we're talking about? Okay, I'm seeing lots of 1s and 2s. That is excellent. As you're typing in there, if you could also mention what's your role? So is it faculty or teaching and learning center folks, hybrid roles, just so that I can kind of get a feel for, and we can all kind of get a feel for what our community is today. Okay, so we've got more administrative type folks, coordinator, teaching and learning center. Okay, so faculty/faculty development. Okay, so wide range of folks, but the ones that I am not surprised would be interested in having this conversation around Title II updates. So excellent. This is kind of the audience that I was aiming for with this. So looks like we'll be in a good direction here. important disclaimer before I get into this. As I said, I am an instructional designer. I work in our teaching and learning center, which means my role is to help faculty implement accessibility best practices. I am not a legal professional. None of this is legal advice. If you are wondering the specific interpretations that your university is using, or specific ways in which the law may or may not impact your college or university, absolutely reach out to the legal or institutional equity and compliance offices at your university. So I I am a person that is helping implement some of this, but definitely not any form of legal profession. So just a little bit of background on what I'm really talking about here with updates to Title II, right? So Title II is the Americans with Disabilities Act that solidified in law that people with disabilities should have equal access to state and government services. This includes, public spaces, buildings, the things that we're familiar with, elevators and curb cuts and automatic doors and buildings and things like that. But it also includes web content and digital applications. So this was added after the original Americans with Disabilities Act passed, but it is a full part of the law that people with disabilities should have full and equal access to web content and digital spaces. Now, this has been the law for quite some time now. The Americans with Disabilities Act is not in itself new. But what changed is that last April, we got clarification from the federal government about how they are expecting colleges, universities, as well as state, local governments to implement the law. And so what they said is that all digital materials on web spaces owned by state, local, federal government, including public colleges and universities, are required to meet the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 level AA standards. I'm not going to go into deep detail on that, but I did put a link here if you'd like to see exactly what that means. And they only gave us a relatively short period of time to meet that. So for anyone where your state or local population is 50,000 or larger, and this means the local population, not the size of the university. So for example, the University of Nebraska Lincoln only has about 30,000 students, but we are in a population center that has 350,000 people. So our deadline is that April 24th date. If your state and local population is smaller, you have a little bit longer time, April of 2027, in recognition that those areas may be less resourced and it may take a little bit longer to become in compliance. But I think for a lot of our colleges and universities, they're probably in those larger population centers and will need to meet these guidelines by that April 24th of 2026 date. So a little over a year from today. Now, this is good for students. I don't think this is the audience where I necessarily have to make this pitch, but I will make clear that, this is a good thing. We're not just doing this because of legal compliance. We're doing this because it's going to help our students. We know that accessibility helps all students, not just those with disabilities. A really great thing about this is that right now, a lot of universities are working on a retroactive accommodation model where if you have a student that needs accessible course materials, it can take weeks for them to actually get that after the semester starts, setting those students behind. And we know that retention, completion rates are lower for students with disabilities. And so being proactive about this is going to significantly help our students with disabilities. We also know that most students with disabilities don't have formal accommodations. Only about a third are estimated to have those formal accommodations. So this is helping a wider range of students with disabilities. And we know that these changes help learning, they help retention. So these are good things, independent of the legal mandate here. This is a very good thing. But it does involve a lot of work for faculty because historically, these guidelines have really only applied to public-facing websites But now all digital content that a university is posting, whether it's internal or external facing, are going to need to meet these guidelines. So this means everything that is in our learning management systems, assignments, quizzes posted, informational pages, that kind of thing, as well as any documents. So PDF readings, PowerPoint slides, Word documents with assignment instructions, any websites that faculty are using for course content, as well as any websites that we are using for, internal use at our college or university. This includes publisher materials like textbooks, and importantly, instructors and the university as a whole are responsible for any materials that they are using, not just things they're creating. So if you are using a textbook that is published by, a publisher outside the university, if you are choosing to use those materials in your courses, those materials are expected to meet these guidelines. And if you're not familiar with the WCAG guidelines, I will say there is not a single course that I have seen that actually meets these guidelines without someone taking this very, very seriously. So these guidelines are something that the vast majority of courses are not going to be meeting unless those faculty have specific training and are taking steps to make this happen. So this is a relatively large change from how things have happened historically, where we would only be making materials accessible if there is a specific student that requires an accommodation. So with that, I am gonna open the floor to a little bit of conversation here. So for folks that have already been working in this space and maybe have an answer to this ready, you can go ahead and drop in the chat of what are the biggest challenges that you're anticipating with this process. For folks where this is maybe newer information, just kind of based on your understanding here, what's the first kind of things that come to mind as challenges or roadblocks that we might run into when thinking about implementing this at the full college or university level. So I'll give folks a couple minutes to post in the chat. Yeah, Kevin, that is a huge one. If I have to make it accessible, then I'm just gonna stop making things available. So I'm gonna stop posting my PowerPoint slides. I'm gonna stop, making anything available. And we're going back to all students must just do handwritten notes while I speak for the PowerPoint. We're hearing that one a lot. Yeah, so support for people like adjunct faculty, or even graduate assistants, courses where maybe it's the same material, but it's changing hands every year and nobody's really directly responsible for it. Who's going to help there? Yeah, how do we make this be systematic rather than just teaching and learning centers putting it out there and we end up speaking to the choir, and the only ones taking it seriously are the ones that always take us seriously when we tell them things, for sure. Yeah, images, graphs, PowerPoints, especially in math and other STEM fields, for sure. Yeah, I think Jen brings up a really good point about a lot of times we end up with this piecemeal approach where some people are working in this department over here, so we know that they're okay, but what's happening at the rest of the university, and are we talking to each other? Are we sharing resources? That kind of thing. Yeah, the why is super important, and I think doesn't get communicated as much as the you have to do this. Yeah, we are adding funding, or we're adding requirements, but are we going to add funding to meet them? As far as I can tell, most universities are just telling faculty, hey, by the way, this is an extra thing that you get to do on top of everything else that you're doing. and we're not going to provide funding. We will provide some resources, but that's about it. And yeah, just a lot of anxiety, overwhelm. Seems like what you all are hearing is very much the same thing that I'm seeing. Yeah, Lee, not to mention that our faculty are busy panicking about other things like AI and student mental health, and also faculty mental health and faculty burnout, and all of the other things that are often going on. So we're going through a Microsoft transition right now where all of our, OneDrive and SharePoint links are breaking. And so putting this information out there during the same presentation where we get to talk about that is really not helping the situation. So it seems like what's in the chat is very much the same things that I'm seeing. So I put together a slide of sort of the biggest challenges that I'm seeing, and I think pretty much everything that I've got on here was already mentioned in the chat. Oh, Kevin, yeah, the people in charge of helping maybe don't have the same level of technical training that they need, and so part of it with us is, how do we get the training that we need in order to help the people that we're supposed to be helping. And so yeah, sometimes the people that are generally in charge of training at the university, this may be a new space for them, needing to make sure that they have what they need as well. So there are a lot of challenges here, partially on the faculty training and messaging side of things, partially on the administrative and resources side of things. But I think the biggest fear that I'm really hearing from faculty, or the biggest thing that's really coming through, is if we don't message this right and do it in a convincing way, it's possible that we're going to make the overall quality of education worse, because faculty are just going to stop sharing anything, right? They're going to say, this is overwhelming, it is too much. And so I'm going to stop giving my students the PowerPoint slides. I'm going to stop giving them additional resources. I'm not going to build anything into the LMS. And we know that those are things that help student learning. And so it's how do we make this happen in a way that gets across to our faculty that this is important and it is helping students, and it is designed to make things better. It is not intended as a punishment for you. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing at the University of Nebraska Lincoln. I will share the resources that we have available, and then we'll have some conversation about what we might be able to do together. So I will say, even before this Title II update happened, our team, so our accessibility mini team, had been working on this for quite some time. So back during the pandemic, we realized that accessibility was a key thing that we could do to really help our faculty make their courses more inclusive. So we worked with other folks on campus to build a digital accessibility collaboration. So this was a group that included our Teaching and Learning Center, our academic technologies folks, the libraries, institutional equity and compliance, and services for students with disabilities. And we would meet regularly once a month just to talk about what's happening in accessibility, what resources do we need, what could we be doing better to support our students. So we already had some level of infrastructure ready to kind of respond to this. And that collaborative had developed a couple of really useful resources. So one was an asynchronous 1 to 2 hour training on accessibility basics to help faculty get familiarized with the language and practice of making things accessible. And we had started building out some pretty comprehensive web resources. So there's a link there to what we have on our website. A lot of that was already there before the Title II thing, but we've definitely been beefing that up. And really importantly, we already had good connections and buy-in with our administrators. So we had been working with the deans of all of the colleges on campus on, getting their faculty to take this training. We had been getting the word out to faculty. So while there hadn't been a ton of uptake among faculty in taking it, we at least already had our deans in a place where this is language they were familiar with, and we had established those communication structures. So Eliana, I can drop the slides link in the chat in case you missed that. So all of you should be able to access all of the links throughout there. I haven't grabbed them all individually, but yeah. So even before the Title II updates, we were making progress in this space, which I think was really helpful. And so we've been really building on that over the last year. So we've been able to get some very targeted messaging from our administration. So our executive vice chancellor has been sending out communication to all of our deans and has actually told them, hey, we should really aim for having all of our stuff in compliance by fall of 2025 to really get ahead of this, which has been fantastic. So they're at least getting some messaging out. And there's a link there to kind of what that messaging has looked like and what information is available on our website within our executive vice chancellor's office. We've now built out a university-wide task force, and actually there's a task force now in development at the full university system level to see if we can work smarter, not harder, so we're not duplicating effort at our different campuses. This semester, we offered synchronous trainings via Zoom with a certificate available for folks that attended enough of them, and it seems like that certificate was motivating for a number of people. Particularly was interesting, we had a number of staff attend, seeing that certificate as something that they could use as evidence of professional development to maybe get a better raise over the next year, which is not what we were intending, but seems like a cool way of getting people invested in our trainings. And we have significantly increased our resources. As someone mentioned in the chat, STEM courses are particularly challenging. There are a lot of really complicated diagrams and figures and graphs, and also teaching methods like doing handwritten notes that you make available to students every class period, which is amazing pedagogy, but a huge challenge in terms of digital accessibility. So we're working on creating some more STEM focused guidelines around those particular teaching challenges. We also put together a guide for thinking through this at the course level. So we've got, a bunch of checklists for individual types of materials, but really, how do we help faculty think about this at the course level and a little bit more holistically? And we're working on, goal setting in individual colleges, whether that's, trying to get all of your faculty to, take the asynchronous training or spending a certain amount of time working on their courses, but really trying to get those individual colleges to think critically about this and engage in some goal setting. And yeah, Kevin, STEM also has some issues around formulas and special notation. So we're working on some guidance around mathematical equations and what does it take to make those accessible, since those take some additional steps beyond just what's generally on checklists. So with all of that, right, it sounds like we're doing a lot, and we are. On the one hand, like we've got a lot of structure that we're building on, we've got some momentum at the university. But on the other hand, every time I do a presentation to faculty, there's a lot of, how serious is this? Do I really have to do this? This doesn't seem that important. What about all the other things I have going on? And the folks that are taking it seriously, a lot of them have just flipped into complete panic mode and don't know what they're going to do and are feeling completely overwhelmed. So I think there's a lot more maybe emotion management than that any of us were expecting going into it, and that's a piece that we're in the process of kind of figuring out. When you're doing this messaging, how do you do that in a way that gets people to take it seriously, but doesn't throw everyone into sort of complete fight or flight panic mode? So for the rest of today, what I really want us to do is first off to engage in resource sharing. So I'll give you a Padlet board and some time to just kind of share what is your university doing. Anything that you can possibly share, whether it's the messaging that's going out or the resources that you've developed, I think will be incredibly useful as we're all kind of thinking about what are the holes that we need to plug, what do we need to develop. And then we'll have some time for kind of individual reflection alongside thinking more broadly about are there ways in which we could work together on this? Because I really feel like there are. So I've set up a Padlet board that I thought maybe we could use to share our own resources. So you can either snag the QR code or the link is go.unl.edu/Peralta 2025. And I will go ahead and drop that in the chat if that makes your life easier. But the board is set up with kind of 5 different categories along the top. So this maybe will help keep things a little bit more organized. So if your university has any kind of task forces, or maybe has like hired a project manager or has hired like people to help with this and build infrastructure, you can throw that under maybe the organizing part. In terms of resources, do you have really great web resources you'd like to share? Have you found a way of getting additional funding for this? What does that look like? Are there grants available to faculty or departments to help with remediation? That kind of thing. In terms of training, do you have great synchronous or asynchronous stuff out there? And then in terms of messaging, if you have any insights in terms of what approach you found useful or not particularly useful, things you've tried and it didn't go well. And then, yeah, if there's anything else that you feel like you could share. And so, if you have specific links, drop those. If it's just, I have some concepts or ideas that I found useful, I found messaging that's useful, feel free to drop that in there. So I will stop talking and give you all about 5 minutes to go ahead and fill in anything that you have there. All right, I lost track of time because I was being really excited by what everyone else was posting, but I'll give you about 20 seconds to finish up whatever you might be working on. All right. So what I'm seeing from some folks posting is that um, tools like Ally in the LMS are incredibly helpful. I strongly suspect more universities are going to be moving in that direction. So we are about to get it installed. It's like tied up in legal contracts right now, but I'm very excited to see how that plays out. But for folks that might be less familiar, would somebody that has Ally on their campus be willing to explain a little bit more what that is and why you find it particularly useful for this? Because I'm only, only sort of passingly familiar since we don't have it in.
I can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Ally, Colorado Mountain College, let's see, we've had it for probably about 4, maybe 5 years. And it looks at the content in your class that the instructor can see and rates it on a little visual scale, which is nice. What is your, how good, how compliant is your content? And then it gives you ways to fix that. Some of it you have to re-upload documents. Some of it you can do, for example, with alt text, you can add the text that will help clear that issue. It's also really good for converting documents perhaps, or converting what someone sees into EPUB or PDF, although we're downplaying PDFs, or oral, I think Braille as well. So it does a couple of things. It lets the instructor look at their course. On the management admin side, it gives admin reports on who's doing what and how well. And on the instructor side, it gives me management capabilities, and for the student, it lets them make more usable access material easier usability wise.
Yeah, so, sounds like a good tool for maybe reducing the workload required for faculty on doing some of these things. I noticed that somebody posted on the Padlet board, that Creative Lobster, that they have already had Oscar in place and have been offering accessibility webinars. When you say, because my understanding is that normally when you're doing the Oscar piece, somebody is required to kind of do some compliance checks there? Is that how it works? Or is it just sort of you're making that available to faculty and they're taking that seriously? If whoever posted that wouldn't mind talking a little bit more about it. I think that's part of the challenge that we're running into is, it's one thing to make the information available to faculty, but another to be able to actually determine whether they're following through on everything. And I mean, even the Ally, there are tons of aspects of accessibility that those checkers aren't going to catch. And so without some kind of quality assurance, feels like that can be challenging. All right, so we're getting short on time. So the last piece that I want us to think about is like, what are steps that we can take to bridge that gap between where we're at? And are there ways that universities could be working together on this? Because it feels like all of us are doing the same thing, but a lot of us are doing it independently. And I know my team, we have been putting so much work into this. It's become a decent chunk of our entire workload. Um, Anybody have thoughts, or, if you have multi-institution collaborations, what does that look like, and what have you found useful in terms of resource sharing?
As people tape their ideas, I can share that I see the biggest challenge is the tension between academic freedom and everybody wants to create their own materials, and everybody has to make those materials accessible. So finding like, what is it worth creating anew, different with your own imprint on it, and what is it okay to reuse, especially after it's been made accessible. And those are the things that I encourage instructors to think about. I've done workshops with teachers who almost broke down in tears when they realized they had 85 to 100 documents per course that they had to go through and remediate because they hadn't even used headings. And so they were starting from literally ground zero. And I told that person and everybody in the room, like, hey, there are people who can help. You can do this in chunks. You can try to, make many hands make light work. There's lots of different ways to approach it, but, now we're seeing with these concrete deadlines as opposed to wait until someone says, I need an accommodation, and then you have a week to remediate all this. It has to be ready in advance. And I think the part that people miss is that Microsoft did research back in 2011, 2010 that showed that 60 to 65% of the population benefit from these remediations. It's like curb cuts on a sidewalk, right? Everybody benefits. It's just only a certain percentage that we think we're quote unquote doing this for. But soapbox over, closing my mute.
Yeah, and that's where, um, I've talked to a wide range of folks about this, and my sense is almost that a lot of the, community college folks, or those that have more online teaching, or even those that just rely more on adjuncts, are maybe farther along with this because there is more, quality assurance process, using the Oscar rubric, or, having some kind of course development guidelines in place, or having somebody that's, checking courses and giving them the okay before they launch. Whereas I think, yeah, the larger traditional public universities are where there's a lot more of the staunch defense of academic freedom, and everyone's going to do whatever they want, and you can't make me use, a standard template in our LMS. And so, as we've been having these conversations, it's how do we meet these instructors where they're at, and try not to be disruptive of, what they're already trying to do, so that we can work this into what they're already doing, but also recognize that, maybe what they're doing is, and teaching the same course in the exact same way that they did it for the last 30 years, is maybe not optimal, and this is an opportunity to, bring your course design into the modern era. That's a really interesting question, Evan, because yeah, that's really the message that we've been trying to get across, is learn good practices and build things accessible up front, because remediation is incredibly challenging, especially with things like PowerPoint slides and PDFs. Trying to remediate those is probably a lot harder than just building it from the, building it fresh. And, I think that's another part of the ongoing challenge here is I think a lot of administrators are just kind of focused on the, April 2026 or, 27 deadline, and not recognizing this is an ongoing thing. You are going to need to keep training faculty. Every time you have new faculty, you're going to have to make sure that they know how to do this and that everyone is doing it in an ongoing way, because it's not, we make things accessible on that day and then we can go back to whatever we were doing before. Interesting use of Gemini there, Kevin.
I figured it would possibly shorten the timeline for looking up all the research, and who knows if it's a hallucination, but it talks about 15% or more increase in time if you're retrofitting rather than starting from the beginning.
Yeah, Jamie, like using AI is absolutely like the solution that I am pushing for a lot of this. So, I think in a lot of ways, the hardest lift is going to be creating alt text and long form descriptions for complicated images and diagrams and that kind of thing. And that's where AI, I've been playing with it and have been really pleased with it. I know Arizona State University has an alt text and long form description AI generator. And because it's a university, I'm guessing it was trained on a lot of academic materials. And so it's actually done a really good job at interpreting like handwritten physics diagrams. So yeah, AI is, I think, going to be a large part of making all of this manageable. Any other thoughts on tips or tricks that we can present to faculty as ways of speeding up this process? I did notice that Marie posted in the Padlet board that they're offering a financial incentive if their entire college hits a 90% ally score, and that sounds like an excellent way of getting your dean to take this seriously and actually work with faculty on making these changes happen. So that is a beautiful piece of leverage that I will absolutely be taking forward to my administrators. Any other last minute thoughts, questions, comments? I think we might actually be 3 minutes over time. I don't remember if this was till 1:45 or 50.
It's a range, so we're okay.
All right. So yeah, any last minute thoughts, questions, comments, or challenges that we haven't managed to talk about this year? Hopefully this was useful. Like I said at the beginning, this is just what I'm spending the majority of my time on right now. I'm spending so much thought and energy that I thought it might be useful to have a broader conversation with folks at different universities to see what we're all doing.
Well, speaking for myself, but I suspect there are others in the room, it is welcomed and I'm grateful that you brought up this topic because accessibility is something that is part of the inclusion and belonging conversation that we often gets left out. I love groups that use IDEA, or some form of that, along with the others for decolonization and justice. And there's so many letters that we could add to the acronym. But thank you so much for highlighting this and making the conversation around it here at our conference. I'm going to stop the recording after everybody has a chance to thank Amy, both with virtual applause, come on camera and do the sign language, thank you. But also we'll be engaging in your Padlet and other things asynchronously afterwards. So those who are watching the recording, will make sure you have links to all of the pieces of the puzzle, including Amy's slides. So thank you so much, Amy.
Yeah, and Laura, I saw your question in the chat about accessibility requirements. I don't think the WCAG guidelines have changed since spring 2024, so that should be the current information. But earlier and on my slides, there's a link to the WCAG guidelines, so you might want to just double check whether that's what they were using. And yeah, Carrie, excellent point that like, there's a reason that faculty respond the way that they do when we're talking about this. They are overwhelmed, and I empathize so much with them. And so, yeah, it's how do we have this conversation in a way that recognizes where they're at, why they're feeling the way that they are, and how we move forward with this in the most productive way possible. Absolutely.
All right. Thanks again.
See y'all.